How are you, bud?
I'm doing all right. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Hey,
Hey,
Mark.
our pleasure. So what do you do? I know you do a bunch of tennis stuff in the summer, but have you just been chilling for the last week or so?
I've just been, kind of wandering around in a stupor, trying to figure out what's next. It's kind of weird, right? Like every day, you're like, "What is the Leaf schedule?" Because that's your schedule, and then all of a sudden, it's just over. Kind of waiting on this tray living availability, so don't want to make any plans, right? You're trying to do stuff that you've put off for a while, like get into the dentist and get a haircut and all this stuff, but waiting for this Trey Living avail, which I'm sure will come at some point. But yeah, I've done some tennis. I checked in with some of the Canadian players ahead of the French Open, and I like to get into the prospects as well, draft prospects. I caught up with Ben Danford yesterday, spoke to Easton Cowan before the Memorial Cup, so I like to try and check in on that. But yeah, it's a weird that the first couple weeks after the Leaf season ends is always kind of strange.
Always kind of depressing too, isn't it? Well, Keith Pelly gave us, a media scrum press conference, whatever you want to call it. What was your take after listening to that? Did anything stand out to you?
Nothing too much. I think he said a lot of what you would imagine he would say. I think the decision to move on from Brendan Shanahan, people saw that coming, considering how everything's played out. He's talking about how he can't, evaluate the previous years before he got here, which is something Craig Berube has also said. And I've just been kind of sitting on that and thinking about that and wondering if maybe they should, if they need to do a bit of a deeper dive into what's gone wrong or why this team hasn't lived up to its potential over these years, if that should be a bigger priority for the organization moving forward here. But just in general, I thought, he said what you would expect him to say. He reiterated a lot of things. Good is not good enough. Certainly interesting to hear him talk about, repairing the relationship with fans and the media. That certainly kind of stuck out a bit. So I don't think there was like a headline kind of thing, and that's probably a good thing coming out of that news conference and availability. And I was struck, like you guys were talking about, that he had clearly was on his mind. He had just spoken with Craig Berube, had dinner with him, and he spoke about how Berube changed the culture. So that was interesting. So clearly they like a lot of what's kind of where things are going here with Berube, and he mentioned the strides that have been taken this season. So clearly he feels like things seem to be moving in the right direction.
Yeah, the headliner for me, Masters, was Pelly versus the water bottle. That's all I could focus on, that the entirety of that press conference. But Craig Berube's the one that intrigues me. Pelly called him an incredible asset. Do we have an understanding of what this means? Because we think Berube's going to have a bigger role now, right?
I just think that, clearly he made an impression on Pelly. It's funny how it kind of worked, right? Trey Living was in Calgary at his daughter's graduation. Berube had just had dinner with him, so it did feel like that was front and center for Pelly, and clearly he made an impression on him. Berube did on Pelly, so clearly he thinks that's. And then I asked him about kind of that afterwards, the culture, because he said we did the scrum after the news conference. I said, the culture, you said, the culture is better. What are you seeing? And he pointed out that, the Argos Grey Cup, he was there and he just observed them. And then afterwards he talked to Ryan Dinwiddie, the Argos coach, and said, you guys are going to win, by a couple of touchdowns based on what I just saw. I didn't quite go into the details of it, but clearly he thought there was something positive happening there. And he feels like Berube is bringing, or at least building something similar with the Leafs. It's a hard thing to define, obviously. So that was interesting. And now Trey Living, apparently, like they were going to have dinner on Sunday night, is what Pelly indicated. So we'll see. And I asked him about Trey Living afterwards, like, what gives you confidence in him? And he said, well, you could answer that as well as I could, which is the defense is better, the goaltending is better. So yeah, it's an interesting dynamic. Everyone's going to have, with Shanahan leaving and not being replaced, at least in the immediacy, everyone's going to have a bigger voice right now. It feels like.
Mm-hmm. You'd mentioned how he spoke of changing the relationship with the fans and the media. You're kind of the number one guy around the Leafs in the media. You've been around for a long time. What do you think that means? What do you think would change or could change or should change with their relationship to fans and media?
I think something that could change is, I feel it's very sanitized, the relationship right now. Like it's very, scrums, which, I'm a TV reporter, so that's a lot of my stuff is scrums. But you like to talk to guys that are in the room, even off camera, and it doesn't necessarily have to be about hockey. It's just nice to get to know guys a bit more on a personal level. And I think it makes it a lot easier. It humanizes everything. So it doesn't look like I'm just shoving a mic in someone's face. And when something has gone wrong or even something's gone right, and saying, explain this. I think coming out of the pandemic, it's changed a little bit. It's been a bit more. When I first started many years ago, I just remember we'd go into the dressing room and there'd be a lot of guys there, right? Like it would open up a little earlier, and we would have a chance to, even if you were just talking and shooting the breeze with somebody, there would be opportunities for that. Whereas now it's like, okay, these guys are coming to the back wall and we're going to talk to them. So I just think
Really?
it's more of that, right? Like I find like the room it opens a little later, and got, there are some guys, and Tavares is always out working late, it feels like. And there are guys that are there, but sometimes guys have left the room, and if they're requested, of course they'll come back. But sometimes, it just, I don't know, if there's a way to generate more opportunities to have, you know, just to humanize the relationship a bit more, I think that would be great.
Yeah, that's fair. And I'll pull both you guys. Rosie, we'll start with you. Do you think the Leafs protect their players too much? Like, I know it's the market. I know we talk about this and the big story from Game 7. We talked about it to start the podcast with Maurice and company, what they had to say. But from your vantage point, the former Maple Leaf, and you've lived it, Rosie, what do you think?
Yeah, it's kind of tough to say because I understand why they want, to be the way they are at times. You say one thing and everyone goes off, ourselves included, right? There's a hot sound bite or some guy goes off the cuff with some remark and oh my God. And they've learned from that. They're like, that usually hurts us. So we're going to keep our cards close to our vest and, not give anyone the opportunity to spin some narrative that's probably not going to be in our favor. That being said, there are times where I feel like it goes too far and it bites them in the ass. And like, why not let this player speak freely? And you talk to people behind the scenes and stuff. It's like, man, why wouldn't you just be able to say that out loud? It would do such wonders for everybody who pays attention to this club. That's the stuff they want to hear, and they're never able to. So I think it goes both ways, but they're probably learning with the way social media and Twitter and everything has popped off so heavily in the last decade. I imagine that it's a learning process.
Yeah, it's tough. You can see both sides of that, right? It can be tricky. I just find that there's a lot of great stories, right? Like, and there's a lot of volume too, right? But this is a team that, I know we focus a lot on the playoffs because obviously it's the most important time of year, but the majority of the season and the coverage is during the regular season. And the team has won a lot of games in the regular season over the years. There's been a lot of positive stories, and I think there's an opportunity to tell them more and just not have it be as adversarial as it sometimes feels like it is. Um, and I see it both ways. Like, they do a lot, like especially the top guys, they have a lot of requests beyond just what they might be requested to do from the general media on a given day. So you can certainly understand, like, that brings some of the pressure to that. Like, they only have so many hours of the day, and um, so you understand that. But again, I think it gets back to just trying to find ways to I guess, humanize everybody, humanize the relationship, and tell some of the stories that are positive stories, rather than just, it feels like sometimes just trying to get through the availabilities.
Mhm. Yeah, I would have to agree with that. I'm pretty surprised to hear from you actually that I remember coming off, maybe I'd stay late because I wasn't playing, getting bag skated or something, but I'd come off the ice and there'd be cameras and media people sitting around and one guy's giving an interview and someone else comes and sits beside a guy and you have a little BS and what's happening here or there. And it's off the record. It seems personal. The people. The relationship is just better actually in the room. So to hear that probably COVID, they just kind of kept with those parameters of just it seems very impersonal now by the way you say it. And again, I think that they do that on purpose to try to protect their guys. But I just think if you disconnect too far from the media and the fan base, it's going to be easy for them to turn on you and think of you as almost the bad guy at times, which I don't think serves anybody.
Yeah, I agree. I was like, everyone's trying to do their job right, and I think that if you talk more, you understand each other better.
Mhm.
And I don't want to say that that doesn't happen. Like there are guys that are in the room, like Chris Tanev is always just sitting there. I remember early on, James Van Riemsdyk was always just be sitting there. Everyone has their own routines, right? And people have on certain days things to do. But I'd love to just, the goalies are always kind of just there. So
Yeah.
like those are the guys like that you can like that you tend to have the longest or the most chats with, at least for me. But yeah, it just feels like a lot of stuff is happening at just the back of the wall, like the main scrums. And if you can get just a bit more outside of the scrum format, I think that that would serve everyone well.
Yeah, it's a
Mhm.
really good point. The thing that resonated with me from what you said is that it always seems like you just try to get through the media availability, and it shouldn't be that way sometimes. And I'm curious to see how it looks moving forward. We think there's going to be a huge difference, and that's Mitch Marner. What's your view on Marner's future here with this team, and what's it been like covering him?
It's been amazing covering him. What a story, hometown guy coming in, and there's a guy that it just felt very light, like early years around him, and just everything was fun. And I remember Tavares came in and just joking about how he didn't know whether he wanted to punch him in the face or just laugh at him because he's just got that exuberance to him, right? And there was just a lot of good stories, like a lot of fun stories. And unfortunately, as he's gotten older and the pressure is built in the market, that those have kind of been less or fewer. But yeah, I mean, it's been incredible to cover one of the greatest careers in Leafs, history in terms of the what he's done and some of the records he set and rising up the record books. And I find him to have a great personality too. I know sometimes it doesn't necessarily come off that way, but I find that when he's really feeling good and in a good mood, he can be a really engaging guy to talk to. And then yeah, just being in the scrums around him, the final couple after Game 7 on locker cleanout day, it sure felt like like it was the end. That's just how it felt, and
Mhm.
certainly that's been the reporting from our insiders is that it feels like he's going to go to market. So, uh, in a way, it feels a little sad that it would end this way, kind of on a down note, considering how much he's brought to the organization over the years. And you can sense how much he wants this to work. Sometimes maybe he's wanted it too much to work. But yeah, it does feel like we're coming to the end, and it's a little bittersweet, I would say.
Mhm. Yeah, by all accounts, very possibly the end of an era in a lot of ways. From your perspective, being around the team every single day, what do you think it is or it was that has them just not over that hump? What do you think they're missing?
Well, it feels very similar every year, right?
Yeah.
That's why I was saying it would be great. I think it's important. Like I asked Berube during the playoffs, like, have you looked at what happened in the playoffs with the Leafs in this era? And he said, no, I'm not looking at that. I don't think it would help me. I don't think it would help them. But it does feel like it's the same thing, which is the offense dries up, the top guys can't break through, and the depth isn't there. It feels like they've had 5 straight game sevens with one goal scored, right? And then they had the
Yeah.
game 5 in the bubble where they were shut out. Like it just feels like they get to the end of these series and it's really hard to generate offense. And whether that's a mental block for the top guys at that moment, or it's just they've run into quality opponents, which they certainly have.
Mhm.
Um, but it feels like it's been the same thing over and over again. Like it feels like you watch the same movie and the ending. And when they lost Game 5 at home and it did not go well, you're kind of thinking, well, they'll win Game 6 and then lose Game 7. And
Mhm.
it's just like it's the more things change, the more they stay the same because it's a better defense and the goaltending. And I guess you could point to the goaltending and say Bob was better. Sergei Bobrovsky was better down the stretch, and it does feel like in the series they've lost, the other team's goalie's been able to make that one more save, and they haven't been able to get that one more goal. So it's pretty incredible when you think about it, right? Like that they've had all these series deciding games that they've been good enough to get to that
Yeah.
moment, and they just can't do it. And again, it's been the same issues. So I'll be intrigued to hear what Trey Living's takeaway on that is when we get to him eventually.
Yeah, you guys can make a top 10 over at TSN of just disappointing losses for the Maple. Like it's actually wild. And obviously we're very focused on the Maple Leafs, and I'm sure other teams have losses like this, but nothing, it pales in comparison to what the Maple Leafs deal with on a yearly basis. Want to leave you with this. You obviously do a great job. Who's your favorite interview on this team right now?
I think Matthew Nyes right now has
Pretty good
emerged
player,
as
eh?
yeah. I mean, because it's like it's sometimes it's obviously it can be easier to speak your mind when the game supports it, or if you're, lower down the lineup sometimes. Like Ryan Reeves is amazing. I love talking to Ryan Reeves about pretty much any topic. But for me, Matthew Knies this season really found his voice as his role on the team increased, as his play elevated. I find him just to be, he'll think about the question. He'll give you an answer to the question. He's not afraid of saying something. He's not afraid of, talking, going back to you about stuff. He's not afraid to be self-critical. So I was really impressed with him. I think he's an interesting guy, and I think he's probably right at the top of the guys I like to talk to right now in that dressing room.
Yeah, and it sounds like a big priority right now for the Maple Leafs is getting Knies done before the draft. So we'll see if that comes to fruition. Mark, excellent job. Great coverage all season long, man. You're the best. Appreciate your time today.
Thanks so much, guys. Appreciate being on with you.
Make sure to check out more of our content right here on the Leafs Nation YouTube page. We got long form interviews, we got clips, we got epic rants by Jay Rosehill. We simply have it all. And don't forget, you can find out much more at theleafsnation.com. Thanks so much for watching.